Yeah, I'm just doing a little informal live. If anybody comes to this, I'm just going to I guess interact with the audience a bit. Uh See if people actually watched and learned from my documentary series. Yeah, the thumbnail is a picture of a Chi-Com soldier training and jumping through, I guess, a simulated burning structure. Um, so the reason I picked that is because I'm going to be working on my next project coming up here soon, which is going to be my hello, whoever came in. Yeah, I'm going to be working on my next project soon, which is going to be my audio book, my story. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to base it off of the when I made that documentary series about the invasion of the United States by China and Russia. What I'm going to do is when I do the character development, I'm going to place them in in some of the areas that were featured in that documentary series. So basically, what I intend on doing is with that, I'm going to do it sort of like how I did my community tab stories. Only it's going to be an audio book so people can listen, because I know not everybody went in there and actually read those like I hoped they would. But maybe if I do an actual audio book, maybe then people will actually listen to it. So yeah, this time instead of like picking one area to do the character development in for it, I'm going to do it in multiple areas. Like I may have one character that was there during the Battle of DC, or another character that was there during the Phoenix battles and everything that went on in that documentary. Even though I already did one story there, I could still pick a character to have in that same predicament, in that same area, dealing with the same exact things as the other characters did there. Then I'll have one in DC that's in the middle of the Capitol while the Chi-Coms are taking over, and things like that. Maybe I'll do another third character, a fourth character. I'll put the third character maybe in like a in the Northwest, like in the mountains during those mountain battles, like I featured in my Pacific Northwest documentary series. Things like that. I'm going to make it interesting because I'm not going to have it all just the setting of the story in one particular spot. I'll have it in several different spots. So what I can do is I can rotate between the characters in each chapter or part, sort of like what I did in my community tab stories, only this time it'll be an audio book. So, hello everybody who's here. I wanted to just do this informal live to sort of interact with people, whoever came in. So if anybody wants to ask me anything or talk to me about anything, hey, I'm all ears. I'm not doing anything formal. This is very, very informal. So, if you have any questions, feel free to ask or say hello or drop in, whatever you want to do. Oh, hey, Bang Bang, great to see you. Very good to see you. I hope you're doing well today. Yeah, I have a really crazy sleep pattern, so sometimes I'm up and sometimes I'm asleep at different times. So I'm awake. I've been up all night, and I've been contemplating my next project, which is going to be like I said about the thumbnail, where the Chinese, where that Chi-Com soldier is jumping through a simulated burning structure. Well, that's a that's a symbol of my next project. So my next project will be a story. Oh, hey there, weathered Ken. Hey, great to see you too, Ken. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I just wanted to see if what people thought about my documentary series that I created on the hypothetical Second American Civil Conflict based on the sectarian or with factions Syrian style conflict. And if you watched the entire thing, then you saw how it developed in a very rational, logical, very well thought out manner, because even though I made up those factions, those could just as easily be a realistic facet of such a thing in the future. Because people don't know who's waiting in the wings, like who's in the shadows, who's lurking around, who's plotting and scheming. There are plenty of people in this country that have their own designs and their own ideas that would, try to seize power when they saw an opening or a power vacuum. They would try to fill it. It reminds me, speaking of weathered, Ken, your name reminds me of something. Have you all ever heard of the Weather Underground? The Weather Underground was such a group because they were an actual core of leadership of a faction they had created. They had created their own little faction, sort of like in my stories. And what the Weather Underground did, hey, Armored Saint, great to see you too. It's been storming up there, Bang Bang? I know you're up there and like near, I think you're near Michigan, aren't you? Or somewhere like that. I think you're like up in the Midwest or something. But it's stormed down here. It stormed down here also a few nights ago, pretty bad, thundered and everything. It was pretty loud. There was a faction called the Weather Underground back in the 70s, and they were actually responsible for a lot of terrorist attacks and things like that back in the 70s. Now, as that has happened in living color in our reality, so too could even worse, more extreme factions like those that I put in my hypothetical. So when I made that hypothetical, if it happened in Syria, and there's a past precedent of those sorts of things already happening here, then it very, very easily can occur in our reality in the future. So when this country's economy collapses and everything goes to zero and people get out in the streets, all the power-hungry monsters, I mean, really, because some of them probably are, lurking in the shadows with their own ideologies, their own beliefs, their own goals, their own objectives and plans would come out of the shadows, and they would have no ties, no affiliations whatsoever with the Western global elites. They would be purely operating on their own motives for their own objectives, going after power, because there are a lot of people that lust for power, and they're lurking in the shadows, and they know people that know people that know people, if you know what I mean by that. They know powerful people that they could that would align with them in such a situation. Just like I put in my story, all the stuff I put in my documentary is very realistic. In fact, it's hyper realistic because it very easily can happen. And I see it happening because, again, this is a country of some nearly 340 million people. So, in a in a country that big, this vast and this large, with such a tiny security force, I mean, really it is, if you think about it. 2.2 million is the entire military, all branches, all components. They're increasingly depleted. They're increasingly woke and pathetic and poorly trained, horribly led. And they're just going down the drain. You see, when I was in the Army, it was nothing like that. What was it, Armored Saint? I know you were there. Tell people in the chat how it used to be, man, because it didn't used to be like it was now. See, now everything is very, very, just falling apart. It's in tatters. It's decaying. So in a situation where the country's unraveling, there's going to be, power-hungry individuals that all vie and jockey for power in a second American civil conflict. It'll end up like Syria, because America's not special. It's not special. If it happens in other countries, guess what? It can happen here, too. America is not exempt from a sectarian, factional-style, Syrian-style internal conflict. But not only that, as it relates to my next project, I'm still doing it on the original timeline as far as like you know, when people watch, you know, movies that are in order and they call it like something, you know, is called canon, as in it's part of the series and it's part of the timeline. Well, I'm going back and doing the audio book on the invasion. I'm doing it on the original timeline because, again, it's going to go with all the old work I did on this. I'm going to put the characters in places that I featured on the battle maps, but the characters are going to be your street level view of all the combat and everything that happens on the ground during the invasion. So, like, you know, hey, Mary, good to see you. So, yeah, it used to be hardcore Armored Saint, exactly, and now it's pathetic. And you see, you know, the army's sort of even, like, different in some regards, like, as far as, like, how it's comprised. Like, you have, like, the Guard and reservists that are more, like, localized, and they would have more localized loyalties. They wouldn't have loyalties to some central regime. A lot of them didn't take the certain thing in their arm, if you know what I'm talking about. A lot of them didn't take that certain thing in their arm. So you have a lot of them rebelling. If you all remember, I don't know if you all remember correctly, but I mean, at the globalist installation of their regime puppet that happened back in 2021 in January, the guardsmen that were there turned their backs on him as the puppet was going down the street in his presidential limousine. When they installed that puppet, all the guards people turned their backs on him in the middle of the review. Did you all notice that? They didn't even give him his 21-gun salute. They were supposed to give him a 21-gun salute, and they never did. That's what I'm saying about the military. It's unraveling. It's bifurcating. And discipline is breaking down. In an internal conflict, you will absolutely have... Oh, yeah, exactly, Armored Saint. Yeah, the stress cards, all of it. Yeah, but this is the thing. Your guardsmen and your reservists that are more locally affiliated, that come from the communities, they're not so easily going to go along with any sort of shenanigans from the central regime, who is controlled by the Western globalist elites. Now, remember, I told you all that there is a very, very... very stark difference between the Eastern and the Western globalist elites. Now, you see, the Western elites are out to tear down their own power base. And the reason why they want to tear down their own power base is because they want to, in their minds, in their warped minds, they don't understand cause and effect. See, in their minds, they think they can tear their own power base down, but that leaves them weak and undefended and leaves them with nothing. So you see, they think they're going to tear it down and then they're going to have their little fourth industrial revolution. It's not going to happen like that because they don't understand the laws of cause and effect. You see, if you tear down your own power base and you have rivals, i.e. the world superpower, China, the most powerful nation the world has ever seen, even the Soviet Union at its height, at its peak, industrial output as far as like producing war material, China has surpassed the Soviet Union in the last 5 years, because since the late 90s, and I've said this in my past lives as it pertains to China, now in the late 90s, China stole all of our trade secrets, all the industrial espionage they conducted has bore fruits for them because they were able to use all the corporate industrial espionage, all their gains from it, to go back to China and establish more efficient factories, bigger factories, more of them. And now here we are after almost 20 years. China has established more military armaments production factories than the Soviet Union ever had at its peak. And everybody used to, be like, oh my God, the Soviet Union can build all this and this and this. Oh yeah? Well, look at China now. China has the capacity to build 750 main battle tanks a year since 2018. 750 per year annually. They can build 750 main battle tanks. The Soviet Union couldn't produce that many. Russia can produce 750 tanks. I mean, not seven. That's China. China produces 750. Russia produces 250. You know what Chinese aircraft production capacity is now? 400 aircraft. They can produce 400 fighters or fighter bombers per year annually. Now they can. That's even more. Like, they've increased it. You know, I can't remember how many percentage it was, but it was like, you know, it's way up from like their numbers before it was like before 2018. You know, I study all these facts and figures and statistics. I'm a total nerd when it comes to this stuff. Like, I'm a huge nerd when it comes to math and stats and everything. Well, the Chinese have just built and built and built while we have deindustrialized and tore ourselves apart. You know, Russia can do their 250 tanks and their 150 planes per year. China can do their 750 tanks and 400 planes per year. So we, on the other hand, I don't even think that we can do like 80 tanks anymore per year, because I think the time I saw what their last batch numbers were, they had 11 produced in a year. And that was like the last batch of Abrams they produced. They produced a batch of 11 of them. So what does that say about our output? We have one tank factory, one, and it's in Lima, Ohio. That is our one tank factory. China's Norinco has 300 major armaments production facilities. You know, of course, that's for all different kinds of things, but I guarantee you they've got a lot more tank factories than we have. Shit, man. I don't mean to say shit, but I don't think that's a curse word. It's just a synonym of feces and excrement. But, you know, I mean, really though, I mean, China is a monster when it comes to mass producing anything. If they get the blueprints for something, they're like Lego Man. Like, they just build up and build up. You know, like the Chinese shipyards, they have 1,200 shipyards. We have 4 dedicated military shipyards. China has 1,200. And according to their civil-military fusion policy, they all can be retooled to produce military ships. All civilian industry can be instantly converted to military industry, and so all civilian tech can be used for military tech. So anytime in the civilian sector there's a tech development, guess what? China can use it for their military. They are set up that way. They have set themselves up like that. They have set themselves up to be able to retool all their shipyards and everything else. They have a monstrous amount of factories. China produces more steel than the next 20 nations combined. They produce a little bit over 1 billion tons of steel annually now. That's insane. Like, do you understand how much steel that is? Like, that's insane. And then they have the factories to match it. So that's why they can crank out all these tanks and planes and artillery shells and rifles and mortars and rockets and everything else that they're producing en masse. So when we are tearing ourselves apart and we have an internal conflict, like I put in my scenario. Now remember, in my invasion scenario, it was a best case scenario. It was where we didn't have an internal conflict. All that happened at the beginning of my invasion scenario was that America got hit by hard economic times, but no actual internal conflict. Now, even in the best case scenario, China overruns us when you plug in real units with real equipment, real capabilities. They're within the confines of their hybrid war doctrines, where they have units embedded inside America in CCP regime properties. You have tank units, like tank battalions. You got air defense artillery battalions, probably just sitting right outside of Air Force bases. I mean, that's obvious. Then you have, you'd have their tank battalions. You'd have like their mechanized infantry. You'd have everything. You'd have their attack helos ready. They'd probably have them hidden somewhere in barns or someplace where they could establish portable buildings. I mean, you have all that stuff. You have all those Club K missile launchers, which are disguised as containers. They've brought them in to cargo yards, probably sitting behind a bunch of Walmarts and everywhere else too. So when the Chinese invade, those are all going to pop up and launch their salvo of 4 caliber cruise missiles apiece. China and Russia both produce those. Now, the caliber that China makes is they build it under license because it's a Russian patented weapon. So the Chinese version is the license built version, but it's still built by them, so they still have it, and they have a lot of them. When I told you guys about the stats of the Chinese missile forces, they have an enormous quantity of missiles. They even have missiles still in storage, like they put all their vehicles for their different reserve units and paramilitary forces in storage. They have so much stuff in storage, it's insane. It's insane. China will flatten us in 4 days flat or less. I bet most of the fighting would be over in 2 days with just pockets left to mop up from days 3 and 4, just like I depicted in my best case scenario for America. And that's a best case, and we still get our asses kicked bad. And Russia's in it too, of course. Russia's China's main ally. You know, I mean, Russia's not nearly as big as China, but they're still pretty damn big, and they could kick our ass. You know, so yeah, Russia, China, and all their buddies invade us as a coalition of the willing to disarm the United States, just like that puppet Bush said about Saddam Hussein. You know, he's going to lead a coalition of the willing to disarm Saddam's regime. You know, I remember that because I went to Iraq. I was there. You know, I mean, you know, I'm debating whether to put up my vehicle that I got blasted in, my first vehicle that got hit, because I have a nice picture of it. I don't know if I should put it up or not. I mean, everybody got out alive, but we all got pretty badly injured. You know, we all got brain damage or spine and neck injuries from the blast. You know, that was at the little battle we had at Samud. You know, it was like a 2-part battle. Like, we went in there to go raid the town and, you know, kick down doors and all that, but we didn't even make it in the town because they mined the entire road in there. We lost 3 vehicles. Then I started hearing rounds zing by my head. You know, there's no mistaking it. You know, I was being shot at. And then, you know, they told me to return fire, you know, so I just let it rock, you know, I let it ride, you know, that M249. I just, you know, sprayed ahead at this little shit shack down the end of the road, and I sprayed it at the ground just to hit mines if there were any more. Then I sprayed the town, you know, I had to return fire, you know, I mean, and then we rolled back like 6 feet, and then bam, you know, it just threw me around. Everything went black. It was like I felt like I was dead when I got up. I thought I was in hell because I heard someone yell fire, and that's what let me realize I was still alive. But when I first came to, because I was unconscious for at least 2 minutes, because when I came to, there was a fire, you know, and that's why I thought I died and went to hell. I'm like, oh my God, you know, like I started feeling my legs and everything because I didn't know, you know, if I was alive or dead. You know, I wanted to make sure I had my limbs. You know, it was like the first thing I did. And then I got up and I climbed out of the hatch where I'd just been standing as a gunner, because I was sitting there because I got thrown around and I smacked my head and my back and neck on all the metal, and I was unconscious. Then when I came to, you know, and I realized I was still alive, and I heard my truck commander, my squad, my sergeant yell, you know, fire. I got up and I climbed out of that thing, and I ran to the front, and there was flames leaping up because it was like my body was on autopilot, you know. It was crazy, you know. It was like the training kicked in, and I like ran to the front because we had to do fire drills on our vehicles. So I ran to the front because that's how you're supposed to get down from the top, but there was flames coming up, so I had to run to the back, and it felt like it was forever, but really in reality, I was moving really, really fast, but it felt like an eternity. When I was up there, I was like, do I jump? You know, because it was really high. It was a really high jump, and I had all this heavy gear on me. And I was like, do I jump and like break my wrists, or do I just stay up here and get picked off, or what? You know, because I didn't know if there was still going to be people shooting at me. Because I mean, I'd returned fire, but I didn't know if I hit them or not. You know, but you know, it was a crazy moment. So I threw my rifle down, and then I jumped off. You know, and good thing it was moon dust, and moon dust is this really fine like silt type of sand, and you know, it was just, you know, I landed and a big puff of sand came up, and you know, it kind of broke my fall a little bit. It hurt, but you know, I made it. And then, you know, I ran over to a berm to take cover just in case. You know, I didn't know if they were going to keep shooting at us or not. You know, but I mean, I shot back. I guess I hit somebody, I think. You know, I mean, when they did the battle damage assessment, you know, later on, there were dead people there. So, you know, I hit somebody. And then, like, you know, they finally came and picked us up. And then when they medevaced us out, you know, they flew in some Apaches, and they used their rocket pods. They didn't fire no Hellfires or nothing. They just fired their rocket pods at the town. I guess it's not there no more, but that was quite a day. That was quite a day. But I don't know how I got off on that. I can't even remember what I was even talking about that led to that. But oh yeah, Armored Saint. Yeah. Oh yeah, Ken. That's just one experience. That was just the first time I got blown up. There was a second time, and then that was when they offered me my chance to go home. But I was like, no, I was stupid and greedy, and I was making good money, and I wanted to stay and finish the tour because there's kind of like a stigma attached to you if you went home early. I didn't want to go home and be looked at like some kind of a broke dick. So that's what they called us. If you're injured. So I just stayed. I ended up staying, but it was quite a tour. It was a hell of a tour. But yeah, yeah, I oh yeah, bang bang. I thought that Lima, Ohio video. I think that is one of the places they have them. I know they're also in Georgia too, like outside of Atlanta. I think they're like in Fulton County down there somewhere too. The black coffins. But yeah, I don't know how I got off on that tangent about Iraq. I was just I was in the zone. I was like really like I felt like I went back in my mind. But yeah. Anyway, I was talking about that's it. I was talking about my project in China. But yeah, China is the world superpower. Like they're the most powerful country on earth, and they will squash us like an ant, whether we have an internal conflict or not. But what China is doing, China is a very austere nation led by an austere group of elites within the CCP regime. And they look at Xi Jinping as their god, like because China is a secular, humanist, despotic police state regime. And in China, they look at their supreme leader as God because they're godless communists, which communism is a form of secular humanism where the state is worshipped. So the one who heads the state, their emperor for life, who is Xi Jinping, who is a warlord, he is their god, and he is going to conquer a lot of the world. So is Vladimir Putin. Both of them together are going to crush the West in World War III. They're going to end the West and the Western elites forever. That is why I say that there will be no such thing as a Great Reset, not the Western Great Reset. All there will be the Beast Kingdom, and it'll be ruled by the 10 kings of Revelation, like it says, and those 10 kings will be Eastern victorious kings in World War III, of the Eastern elites. They will destroy the West and its pretty hands, never worked a day in their lives, silver spoon in their ass elites. They will crush them like ants, and they will conquer the world. And then the beast will come on the scene. He will flatter the 10 kings because the Bible says he attains his kingdom through flattery because he has no power of his own. He has to go to the Eastern elites like Xi Jinping and Putin and all them, and he has to flatter them and have his false prophet do miracles in front of them to get them to agree to cede power to him so that they will reign together with the beast for 1 hour, like it says in Revelation. But yeah, they're going to crush the West. There will be no such thing as a Western bloc. The West will be destroyed in the end times, in World War III, because China is the most powerful nation on earth. Nobody can touch China. I mean, and Russia's the second. But China, it just eclipses everybody when it comes to industrial might, steel production. Their conventional military is a behemoth. It's gargantuan. There's no word for it. When you have 20 million paramilitary, that's your national military, your Marine militia, your PAP, which is your People's Armed Police, the fanatical regime loyalist forces. You have the National Construction Corps, which is like the Chinese paramilitary equivalent of our Army Corps of Engineers, except they're armed and they're trained by the military. So it's a paramilitary, militarily trained and armed construction force. So they're basically paramilitary combat engineers. And then you have the PLA strategic reserves, which are like their extra PLA reserves. Like they have their regular PLA reserves, and then they got their PLA strategic reserves for at home, And that's a gargantuan force, 20 million paramilitary. Then you have the regular PLA, which is their army, which is like their whole active military is 4 million, but their army out of that 4 million is like it's over 2.5 million, and that's their cream of the crop army forces, like their Category A forces. Then you have their Category B forces, like their reserves, and I'm sure there's a few Category A units in the reserves too that get some of the really good equipment and everything too. Then you have the Category B. They're still pretty hardcore, badass, well equipped, well trained. But then you have your C category forces, which are like your home defense forces, like the majority of your paramilitary, minus maybe like the PAP, which would be used in like the PAP could be used in like direct combat because they do have armored vehicles and they are equipped for combat missions. They use them in combat against the Uyghur to the Gurs and other restive minorities in Xinjiang and Tibet. So yeah, the PAP can definitely be used in combat. So they're like either a A or B category. They have combat experience from their low-level counterinsurgency in the west of China. So yeah, China is the world superpower and has been since at least 2018. We lose every single solitary war simulation to China, and we have since 2018. And China's industry took off about that time because before that, it was when they were building up their factories, continually increasing their steel output, building more ships. Now they've surpassed us with their Navy, and they have quite a bit more ships than we do. They even have a bigger submarine fleet than we do. That's not just the surface ships, the subs and submarines. They have 2 more subs than we do, and counting. They're continually cranking out submarines. We cannot keep up with China in anything. We are deindustrialized. We are like maybe at like 5 or 10% of what we were when it comes to like World War II output of things. We are much less than that World War II level. We could not just retool and reopen all the factories we shut down. That would be impossible. That would be an impossible task. It cannot be done. All the empty factories that have just sat there decaying with all the machinery stripped out of it. Oh hell no. No, you're never going to get those up and running again. That's over. That's done. Yeah, it would be like Enemy at the Gates, like I said before, like when that one Soviet guy's like telling every other guy to get a rifle, and every other guy gets a stripper clip of like 5 rounds each, and they send them into like human wave assaults. That would be like, I could see that like in America, like you're at the point where you're so deindustrialized, you got to give every other man a rifle. I mean, not that we don't have a ton of small arms here. That's not the issue. It's just the issue of when you go into a military force, they want to equip you. They want to give you a standardized type of equipment, so you can't like bring your own firearms. I mean, so they're going to give you whatever they can give you, and if they don't have anything to arm you with, well, then you're just shit out of luck. I mean, then it's like Enemy at the Gates, where they're giving every other dude a rifle. You might as well have just brought your own. And then that's when you start complaining and tell them, hey man, I have my own stuff at home. I should have just brought my own shit. I mean, but we're that deindustrialized, man. It's a shame. It's pathetic. It's sad. And it is sad. This country didn't used to be in such dire straits. This country actually used to be something, but they've ripped it apart because they're in their pursuit of their insane Western globalist mindset, where they want to tear everything down. And hi A from Australia, good to see you. And Zach, good to see you. Yeah, that's the 20 million combat vets. I've mentioned that before, Zach. It's not that they wouldn't be able to do some sort of guerrilla type stuff if we didn't have like an internal conflict. It would be like in my story I wrote, or in my maps, where you have partisan forces joining up, which would be like your combat vets or people that they could train to maybe like resist. But you got to understand, Zach, when you don't have proper anti-tank weapons, I don't care how many infantry guys you have. Like if you got guys with small arms, they're not going to be able to take out tanks with small arms. You have a swarm of mechanized infantry coming at you, and all you have is some, and I've showed examples of that in my stories, how I wrote that. The Iraqis tried to do it to us in the beginning, but they found out real quick that their little infantry forces can't take on mechanized forces that have heavy machine guns and Mark 19 grenade launchers. They get blasted to pieces quick. quick. They make short work of them. So the same thing would happen here. You would have your 20 million combat vets. Yeah, they're good against something like like if there was an internal conflict. Yeah, your 20 million combat vets would make an effect against like the woke army of like 2.2 million, like this rinky-dink little pissant, army that we have now, or this military that's been disintegrating. Yeah, your 20 million combat vets that had much better training and decent enough equipment of their own. Yeah, they could take on the woke military, but they can't take on like the Chinese. The Chinese are gargantuan to start with, and then of course the Chinese are very well trained, very gung ho. They have very good equipment. They have very advanced technology. They have air support. You're not going to defeat the Chinese with your 20 million combat vets. You can do a long insurgency against them, but you can't just beat them outright. Like, you're not going to repel an invasion. You need proper anti-tank weapons. You need to have like an air force of your own. If you're going to I'm talking about just repelling them as soon as they show up. You're not going to beat the Chinese in their invasion phase. I don't care, how many people you have. If they don't have the proper equipment, the logistics. Oh, logistics is another thing. Now that you mention it, Zach, I was going to let you know, logistics and warfare mean everything. You have to have like logistical networks. Because troops can't fight without food, without ammo, without, medical support, without ways to, transport them from A to B. You can't do that. You have to have that stuff. And if you don't have that stuff, your 20 million men ain't going to do shit, because you got to have all that stuff. You got to have logistics to back them up. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just being, honest about it. I'm just a blunt person. I don't insult anybody ever. I love to answer questions and everything. I'm all about it. And I'm glad you're here, Zach, and I welcome you, and you're awesome. And I just wanted to let you know, you're great. I just wanted to answer your question, though. I just wanted to make it known that, you can't do anything against a force like China when you don't have the right equipment, you don't have the necessary logistics that are needed for something such as that, like such a large scale type of a thing. You would have it on the local level, where you would have to have it broken down to where you have localized forces that would conduct guerrilla raids against occupation forces. The Chinese would have already won by that point, is what I'm saying. Like, the Chinese will be inside America. They'll already be occupying it. They'll be in the cities. They'll be in the towns. But what would happen is, Zach, I think you would really like my stuff about the stories I wrote about it. You can go and see how it sort of plays out like that. You could see how the combat vets and everybody all sort of got together, but they lived in the woods, and they had to gather their strength, because at first they didn't have what they needed. They had to gather their strength. They had to acquire better weapons as time went on. And at first they really sucked, and they got wiped out a lot, easily. The Chinese were kicking their asses because they didn't have enough stuff really to take them head on, So what they did then was they started to bide their time. They waited for the occupying forces to get comfortable. They started to do small scale hit and runs, raids on them they looked for weak spots, basically, and they hit the weak spots. They took the weapons from the forces that they hit, then they upgraded to slightly bigger weapons, and they upgraded again. And finally, they got to the point where they had an ample amount of anti-tank weapons and shoulder-fired, air defense weapons, man-portable types that you can fire at helicopters and things, or attack aircraft coming down on a nosedive attack run sort of a deal. It started off where they really didn't have much. But then, over time, they started to get better and better weapons. But at first, with just small arms, you're not really going to be able to take on the Chi-Com army. It's just not going to happen. They will take over, they will occupy this place. But what you'll have to do is if you were a partisan force, you would have to, hide out, bide your time, wait for them to get comfy, and then you would start to conduct your, hit and run type of raids on them, so that you could begin to acquire better and better weapons, and then you would have more of a chance. If you watched my my community tab review playlist. I even talk about a lot of that in there. If you were really interested in that, I have a lot of tactical descriptions that are taken from the actual story itself, and I show excerpts from the different stories that I wrote, and I show what happened in it in detail, and the types of things that were going on and the types of threats that they had to watch out for. Just, I mean, so people can understand what types of things happen in a real war of occupation. Because I was an occupying force. I was an American soldier in Iraq, so I was an occupying force. We were occupying Iraq, and they were fighting against us as a type of a guerrilla type of force. Like they were like an insurgency, a guerrilla force. They were partisans. They were fighting against us. They were like different militias that were up against us in Iraq. Now they couldn't take us toe to toe, but what they did was they would look for weak spots and hit like, you know, support units, or they would hit like, and I'm talking about of ours, or they would hit our allies like the Iraqi army, who were a lot less trained and a lot weaker, and they would acquire weapons from them after they would beat them, because they would like take out an Iraqi guard post and take their rocket-propelled grenades or their you know, machine gun, and then they would have it, and then they would use it against us, and you know, so on and so forth. That's how it generally goes in an occupation. When your enemy, when the occupying power has superior technology and vehicles and weapons, you're not going to be able to go toe to toe with them. You're just not. You can't. You know, you're going to get crushed. I mean, like, Billy Bob ain't going to, like, go out to his mailbox with a shotgun and take on the Chi-Com army. It ain't happening. You know, I mean, you're going to, like, people that are reactionary, that react to it and just run out and have no actionable intel. They don't know where the enemies are. They don't know what's even going on. People that just react to shit and just run out there, they just get blown away because, you know, they made themselves a target, you know, and an easy one, too. So what I'm saying is, in my stories, I convey all that in a logical, rational format where people can understand the realities of war and why things happen. Like basically the mechanics of it, where people can understand the mechanics of warfare and how it really works and what it's really like on the ground. Not based on fantasy fairy tales, but based on reality. You know, war ain't nothing like no video games portray it. It ain't nothing like no movies portray it. There is nothing that can, there's no portrayal of warfare that can do it any sort of justice. And by that, I mean, there's nothing that can accurately portray the realities of it, you know, unless you're actually, you know, you've been there, you've done it, and you use your experience to sort of like convey to others what it's like, you know, like the work I've created basically is the best way that I can convey realistic aspects about war to people, you know, to where they can understand it. I put it in story. I put it in battle maps that are like a macro level. By macro level, I mean a way like overhead view, like you're like looking down at the world type of thing. And a micro level is like a street level view, like you're in the nitty gritty, like you're in the thick of it, in the middle of it. So I've did a macro level view with the world, or with the battle maps, where it's an overhead view of entire units and how they move. And then I did a micro level view with the stories, where you're actually in the characters' mind, and you're watching it through their eyes, and you're experiencing it through their experiences. You know, that's how I did it, and I combined it into one single project. The invasion stuff, and I tried to do similar with the internal conflict, minus the fact that I didn't really like do any more story beyond really the first and second parts. Everything else was just battle maps and explaining the atrocities and the types of things that happen in common civil conflicts, you know. So, yeah, Armored Saint. Yeah, they would surprise us because they were like the Talibans and the Iraqi militias, because there were different like decentralized Iraqi militia forces. Yeah, they would surprise everybody. Like they like to go after the weak targets, like the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police, who were hardly disciplined, who weren't well trained, who would run away from battles and, you know, leave their weapons sometimes. You know, they were cowards, you know. But caliber missiles are very, very potent weapons. You know, like they're very fast. They're supersonic. They're not hypersonic, but they're supersonic. They break the sound barrier. They're very fast. They're faster than the Tomahawk, which is technically subsonic. the Tomahawk could be shot down with like air defense machine gun fire. In Serbia back in 1999, the Serb army was shooting down our Tomahawks with air defense guns like those 57 millimeter flak guns, those huge guns, those air defense guns. Yeah, they were shooting down some of our Tomahawks with those because they could come in. They came in slow enough to where they could be hit, you know. But yeah, yeah, I tried to portray all my work in a way that people can understand it and get an idea of what it's really like. I don't see really very many other people doing the types of things I'm doing. I really don't. I haven't found anybody yet that's willing to like actually sit down and break it all down into like the type of detail that I do it for people. I think I'm the only one that's even doing it like that. I don't know. I can't say that definitively, but I feel like I am because I haven't found anybody like me yet that's breaking things down to like the most minute details, and making maps and, making hypothetical scenarios about war and everything else. I just don't see it. Hey, Mary, good to see you. Hey, Miriam, good to see you too. Yeah, I'm glad that everybody's here. Hey, Chosen One. Hey, Lotus. I'm just saying hi to people. This is a very, very informal live. I actually really wanted to interact with people, so if anybody wants to talk to me, please do. Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, hey, that was the Serbs shot down they didn't, it wasn't a B-2, it was a Nighthawk. It was an F-117 Nighthawk. That was the stealth tactical bomber that was shot down in Serbia. Yeah, I remember that. I do remember that. Yeah. Airrock. Oh, you like my work? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good. It's good to hear. It's good to hear that I'm helping people. I really enjoy hearing people tell me that because it makes me not want to give up on this. Because there are days where I just don't feel like doing it because I'm just like, man, like I don't like. Are people even like getting this material? Or people even like looking at it? Or what's going on here? It's nice to have feedback from people. Thank you. Yeah, I just Hey, MIC, good to see you too. And yeah, Zach, on the timeline thing, um, I, on my predictions, on my personal predictions. Well, you see, when I made those predictions, there is a margin of error. I mean, I might not get it exactly on the like date, but like, when I said that sometime in July, I see Ukraine collapsing. In August, I see the food and fuel situation becoming dire here. No, I'm still sticking by that. I totally do. I see things coming like that. But of course, there's a margin of error. I mean, I might be off by like a month or whatever, but I mean, it's close enough that people are going to see these things this year. Yes, this year. There are going to be a lot of drastic things happening. We're halfway through the year, basically, more or less. I mean, well, yeah, basically. I mean, we still got another half of a year to go. So, and Ukraine is collapsing for all intents and purposes. I mean, it collapses a little more by the day. We're literally propping it up by like bubble gum and shoestrings and I mean, really, like Ukraine's about to collapse any day. I mean, I'm amazed it hasn't. I'm amazed it's lasted this long. I mean, Russia has already ground their forces down to the nub with a limited incursion. A limited incursion. It was a limited incursion. They only sent in 70 or so odd battalions, which is like 65,000 troops. And they crushed a force that outnumbered them locally, and by locally I mean within the actual borders of Ukraine. The whole Russian military is huge. It's much bigger than Ukraine, but Ukraine's forces number some 650,000 when the war began, and that was all their forces, their army, paramilitary, reserves. They outnumbered the Russian incursion forces by a factor of 10 to 1. And in the local area, just inside the borders of Ukraine now, Russia also has proxy allies that they arm. They gave the DPR and the LPR the Luhansk and Donetsk. They gave them weapons and armed them and trained them. So they have proxy allies there that are helping them, But the Russian tiny incursion forces that went in there to give them a boost, they ground the whole Ukrainian armed forces down to the nub. And they were outnumbered. That's a hell of a feat. And people are knocking Russia. I'm like, are you crazy? Do you people not understand anything about military strategy? Do you not understand anything about, the realities of war on the field of battle? Do you not understand that a force that's outnumbered 10-1, that was able to destroy all their heavy equipment, all their tanks, everything, with leaving almost none of it left? And now they're at the point where they're using old men? Are you kidding me? Russia has accomplished a hell of a feat. NATO's got to be scared shitless of Russia by now because, Russia, with a limited incursion, has ground basically the best military that Europe had to offer outside of Russia. They ground them down to the nub, all the major the Western European NATO contributors are weak. I did an actual stat reading where I read the stats of the combined German, British, Italian, and French forces and all their equipment, and I compared it to Russia, their force numbers and equipment. There's no competition, and that's all four of them combined. That's the biggest four European Western NATO contributors, okay? They're not even close to Russia in anything, and except for, I think in the category of, utility helicopters, and that's it. Or, I'm sorry, utility helicopters and miscellaneous armored vehicles, like your engineering and bridge laying vehicles or your armored air defense vehicles, whatever. That. I think those are the only two categories where they even come a little bit close, but there's still not as many as Russia has. Russia is immensely bigger than the Western European NATO members, combined. So, yeah, it's not no issue for Russia. If they ground down the best, and Ukraine is not NATO, they're a NATO partner, but for all intents and purposes, they were a NATO proxy. And that was the best force that NATO could throw at them. And they ground them down to the nub, where there nothing left but old men and some, a Western equipment that they had to send them on an emergency basis. And it's still not enough. It's nothing. I mean, really, they had 1,800 tanks or so when the war began, and the West, and then a lot more artillery. They had, and they're all destroyed now. So when the West sends them 20 howitzers, that ain't no game changer. That ain't shit. What's 20 howitzers going to do when Russia already destroyed way more equipment than that at the beginning of the war? Really, I mean, it's a joke. I mean, like I said, they're being held up by bubble gum and tape and string, and Ukraine could collapse anytime this month or maybe even the next month. But I'm still sticking by my predictions about the food, the fuel, and about Ukraine. And I'm also sticking by my predictions about the end of the year being really, really nasty for us as far as possible World War III and a foreign invasion. That could come at the very end of the year, like winter. I know in my scenarios I have it in October, but, in real life, it might be in wintertime. I see it happening in the cold months, and that's a personal thing for me because of my dreams I've had. I've had some very, very vivid, very lucid, realistic dreams that I know are from God because I've had a series of them. It was like confirmation. And it had to do with personal choices I made in my life. Whether I stayed in a certain place or left a certain place, what would happen to me? Well, I left that place, and I'm glad I did, because in my dream, it was like a nightmare from God because it was so real. I got nuked in my dream because I was in Dallas. I was in downtown the first time I had the dream. The second time, it was showing as if I got out of the city, I knew it was going to happen. I got out of the city right before it happened. And then in the third dream, I was off in the distance and I watched it happen. So it was that was letting me know that there were different options in my life, different roads I could take. I could get out of the city and go somewhere much, much better, or I could stay there and get destroyed. I mean, and that really affected me. It still affects me to this day, that dream, those series of dreams rather, but that first one especially, because the first one was where I actually got nuked in downtown Dallas. It scared the hell out of me. Hey, Romero. Good to see you, brother. But yeah, Yeah, it was quite a dream, you know. Speaking of Romero, I'll give you all a little glimpse at him. I'll give you a glimpse at my Romero here. That's Romero, the boss cat, the fat. Look at the camera, dude. Look at the camera, dude. Look. Give him your boss face. Show him your boss face. Yeah. He's just bossing it up, just laying on the table. He ain't supposed to lay on the table, but he does it from time to time. Because he knows that's where I like to put my ashtray when I have my cigarettes, but he wants to lay there, so I move the ashtray. Because he's the boss. I gotta listen to him, you know? When he tells me he wants to do something, I gotta obey, man. Or he's gonna break my legs. I'm telling you. He's gonna bust my kneecaps. Yeah, I love Romero. He's a good cat. He's always been a good cat. Yeah, he's old though. He's like 15 or 16. And his sister May, his twin sister May, she's the same age. And Porky's my Russian blue, the young one. He's only like 2 or 3. Let me see what people are saying in the chat here. Yeah, he's a good dude. Yeah. No, he didn't want to be on camera. Yep. Yeah, Ken. Yeah, when it talks about the bear and the dragon in the Bible, I feel that that's a layered prophecy. I feel that it's talking not only about, different empires and everything in history, but I feel like it's talking about China and Russia as well. Because China is the red dragon. They are the red dragon, like they're the dragon country. And the bear is Russia. And the dragon gave power to the beast, meaning that I think that means China gave its power to the beast every bit as much as it means Satan gave his power to the beast, because I feel like Xi Jinping is a principality because he rules the most powerful nation on earth, which is China. Right now, China is the world superpower for all the reasons I've mentioned in the past and in this video. They even have, very high technology weapons. They have missile cloaking technology. They have hypersonics, just like Russia. They have hypersonics too. They have they have newer aircrafts. They probably have those anti-gravity crafts too. And I'm sure that, unlike us, how we like to hide all our stuff in underground labs that never get mass produced and never see the light of day. People don't get trained on how to use them, and they don't get deployed and all this other stuff. All our high tech stuff sits underground and it never sees the light of day or mass deployment. But China, they don't have a problem keeping secrets in China because their MSS keeps tabs on all their military industry employees. And also the fact that, the Chinese are patriotic anyway. So, I don't think they have a problem keeping secrets. So I'm sure China's deploying stuff like that, whereas we like to hide ours. China has other high-tech stuff. Like their electronic warfare is insanely powerful. Like they have it to where they can, it's so fine-tuned to where they know all our frequencies and they can jam all our radars, and it goes beyond just jamming our radars. It also has to do with like the whole avionics on our aircrafts, like what they did to the F-35s, that came too close to their bases in the Spratlys. They basically made them almost impossible to fly. They nearly crashed into the ocean. You can't fight a war like that. You're fighting a war in an electronic warfare field where they have total, like, full spectrum dominance in electronic warfare, and they can make your all your computers and everything else malfunction, and your avionics and your aircraft and everything else. You can't beat a country like that. How are you gonna defeat them like that? China has anti-satellite weapons like the FK-2000s, which are built off of the HQ-9Bs, which are very potent air defense weapons, but those FK-2000s that are built off of that HQ-9B platform can go much, much higher, much further, and they can knock satellites down. So, Yeah, and Russia has their S-500. That's their anti-satellite weapon too. So they can also use them to down very high-flying stealth bombers and everything else too. They're fully capable of that. Both China's FK-2000 and Russia's S-500 can do that. So they can be used against air targets, ballistic missiles too. Yeah, they are. They're an anti-ballistic missile weapon as well, and they can down satellites. So yeah, China ain't worried about us. They ain't worried about us. They know how highly dependent we are on our tech. Well, you know what? that's why China puts so much into their cyber warfare capabilities. So China can shut us off. They can shut our grid off with their cyber power, their cyber warfare power that they have. They have an immense power in that field. And they also can, down all our satellites. So there goes our eyes and ears. Now we have no way to gain intelligence of what's going on in the battlefield. We have no way to communicate. Our grid's down. Everything's down. China and Russia just come out of hiding on their CCP properties and just take everything in our cities. Who's going to stop it? Literally, who would stop it? Who would be able to? It's not like everybody in America walks around armed and everyone in America walks around with anti-tank weapons. So when Chinese tanks start rumbling out of farms and go into the cities or come out of warehouses and they start capturing important regime buildings or TV stations, police stations. Who the hell is going to stop them? Nobody. We are not set up to stop a Chinese and Russian hybrid warfare invasion across our country. If some 5 million Trojan if some 5 million Trojan horse shock forces came out of their CCP regime properties all across America and started taking our cities left and right, setting up logistical points along key invasion routes like major highways, like I had in my stories that I wrote in Community tab, like in my third story, which is called Split Up the Middle. That's a very good story. That shows how the external components, through the character's point of view, the externals are the forces that come in from outside the country, that like cross the borders and invade from outside. Then you have the Trojans who are inside. There's no way you can have a front line in a fourth generation warfare environment, because in fourth generation warfare, the battle lines are wherever units are at any given time. There are no front lines. There's no safe rear areas behind the front lines where you can mobilize and have a draft or whatever. There's no place like that where you can mobilize industry or personnel. There's no safe places. How are you going to have a draft when there's foreign troops in your country already that are already capturing things and taking over and seizing important, logistical infrastructure and buildings and cities and setting up their own logistics for their externals that are crossing the borders and paradropping in and beach landing in to meet them in the middle? How are you going to stop that? There's no way you can have a front line. The front line is untenable in a situation like that. It's totally untenable. You cannot have it because, when you have foreign troops inside your country, all over your country, in every corner of it, that come out and rapidly capture things, that would shock people to the core. When you see foreign Chi-Com troops coming out of every nook, cranny, and crevice, armed and in uniform, fully with their units, in their tanks, armor personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, whatever else they got, their trucks, their air defense weapons, all of it, their helicopters. When you see all of that just coming out of nowhere and starting to like seize buildings and capture cities, just who is going to be ready for that? If you take people living the pace of their lives right now, that are just out walking around, taking a stroll down the street, and Chi-Com tanks come rumbling down the street, what are they going to do about it? Really, what are they going to do about it? Imagine you're just taking a walk down a street in major city. You have no weapon. You don't even have a pistol. You're just, taking a casual stroll, and all of a sudden you see Chinese tanks rolling down the streets. They've got their crew serve machine guns mounted on top. Their 12.7 millimeter heavy machine guns. They've got their heads are on a swivel. They're doing full 360 security, where their turret gunners are watching every corner and every alleyway for anyone to pop out. You see them coming down the street, man. You're gonna be running. You can't do nothing about it. There's nothing you can do about it when it's at that point. By the time it happens, it's too late then. That's like why when I wrote my stories, the most important thing that people could do was evacuate, get out of human settlements, go to the woods, and make sure you have caches of ammunition, medical supplies, food, and water that will sustain you for at least a decent amount of time, at least a few months. You know, you have to live in the woods, and you're going to have to learn how to be nomadic or semi-nomadic, where you kind of rotate between where you stay at. You don't want to stay in any one spot too long, because once we get conquered and occupied, the Chi-Coms will then, once they've seized control of all the human settlements, the cities, towns, etc., then they're going to move out and start scouring the woods. Sort of like I did in my stories, how I had them take over the town of Broken Bow when they came in and seized the municipal airport and turned it into a FOB, a forward operating base, and built it up and made it into a FOB. Then they took they took over the town. The people evacuated, and they did like a fighting retreat where they held open a little corridor where the people could evacuate and take all the food, water, and everything they could with them, and go head for the hills and go up into the mountains, into the Ozarks, and that's where they stayed. And for about a month, they were good because the Chinese were still building up, where they were consolidating their gains, getting their logistics in order, because you can't launch a major operation without logistics. You have to have the food, the water, the spare parts for vehicles, the POL products, the fuel, the armaments, the ammunition, the spare parts for weapons even. You got to have it all. You have to have it all. You have to have the personnel, too, that are trained on everything. Then you can launch a operation. But for a while, they were good in the hills. But then the Chi-Coms found out where they were because one of their scouting elements found them, and they got into a little skirmish with them, and then they came back to the FOB, informed them about the size of the enemy element, which was the partisan forces of the Americans. Then they concocted this huge operation to go up there after them, like a counterinsurgency operation. It was a classic cordon and search, where they cordoned off a huge area and swept through it, and there was no way out. You know, the partisans, most of them got killed, but some of them managed to break out. But that was like toward the end. You know, they found like a little slight, you know, opening where they could get through, where they could take on a few of the weaker, lighter armed forces that were blocking the way, and they could take them out just long enough so that they could break out. But you know, situations like that, man, the very, very, very bad situations to be in. That's why you want to be nomadic or semi-nomadic in a situation where the country gets taken over and occupied, because they will, after a while, after they've built up their logistics and their forces, they will then be able to conduct operations where they start sweeping mountains and hills and everything else looking for people. So you have to stay on the move. You have to have different logistical points, like caches, where you have stockpiled food, water, medical, ammo, everything. You have to have places like that out in nature where no one except you knows where they're at. You have to have multiple ones so you can stay moving, because you need something to sustain you while you're on the move. I mean, if you don't have no food or water, what are you going to do? I mean, you're just going to walk around aimlessly without logistics? You can't do that. You cannot do that. You'll go hungry. You'll have a miserable end to yourself. You know, you can't do it like that. You have to have sustenance. You have to have logistics. You cannot operate without logistics, whether you're a Chi-Com unit or whether you're just some lowly American partisan that's just trying to make it. You have to have logistics. You cannot operate without them. You cannot. And that's what I've told people before. If you keep all your supplies, your preps, in one central location, that's bad news right there. Because if you have it all in your house or someplace, and the Chi-Coms take over your town, or they carpet munition your town and blast, and you know, say you're not there, say you're somewhere else, that where you were safe, and they carpet munition your town, or tank shell your town, or fire anti-tank missiles at your town, or whatever, and it hits your house. Yeah, all your stuff is gone. Then it was all for nothing. All your preps were for nothing. You need to have your stuff spaced out. That's the smartest thing you can do, because when we get invaded and occupied, yeah, there's going to be a lot of like just rampant, wanton destruction everywhere. It's going to be all over the place. Totally wanton. It's just gonna happen at a whim, you know, on a whim, you know. I mean, it's gonna be bad. So, yeah, you know, trust me, take it from me. I mean, I've been to Iraq. I've seen similar. So, yeah, it's a bad situation. Yeah, yeah, I'm trying to get people ready for it. Barb Sour, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I know you come here every so often. It's good to see you. Hi, Doopsie Daisy. Well, if you're not ready for it, just get ready for it. Get as ready as you can. You know, if you take initiative, God will take care of the rest. If you seriously took real initiative, just like how Noah took initiative and built his ark, just like how Joseph took initiative and stockpiled grain, if God sees you putting a serious effort into getting ready, then God will do the rest. Like God shut the door for Noah, you know, and God got them through the famine. God will do the rest if you put an effort into it. That God, you can't expect God to do everything for you. You have to take initiative, and that's just a real thing, and that's all in the Bible. You know, I mean, that's a biblical theme. It's like a literal theme. You know, people have to do their own self-defense. They have to do their own prepping. They got to train to defend themselves. You have a biblical duty, if you're a man especially, to defend yourself. You are never to bow to tyranny or to Satan. You know, you have to step on the head of the snake if it comes after you. So, you know, you have to, if you're an able-bodied man, you have to defend yourself against evil, because you're going to have people depending on you. You're going to have a lot of people depending on you. So, you know, you got to protect the weak. You know, you can't just, you know, lay down and be like, "Oh, I give up, come get me." Oh, you know, you can't be like a pansy. You got to be a man, you know. Because I think this false Jesuit church that spreads false doctrines across the American church, I think they convince people that they need to be like wussified and sissified, and that ain't cool, you know. Because real Christianity is manly. Real Christianity is like hoorah, like, you know, like we're gonna fight evil, you know. I mean, you can't, I mean, never be an aggressor. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, but you got to defend yourself against evil. You got to stand there and not take a step back. You got to stand your ground against evil. If evil comes at you, you got to stand there and you got to smack it down, and smack it down hard, and don't look back. You know, you got to defend yourself. It's self-defense is a righteous biblical act, and it's all throughout the Bible. Even Yeshua himself said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one, and that two is enough. Meaning that if you have like a two, to me would be like a pistol, like for your sidearm, and a rifle for your primary weapon. So, you know, two is enough. Yeah, I mean, and you can have even more than that, but two is definitely enough. You should have at least two. So, you know, I take that to heart. You know. So, and not only that, but you got David taking Goliath out, you know, defending his brethren who are horrified of Goliath. Well, he stood up, and he was just a young shepherd boy, and he took out Goliath, and he even picked up 5 extra stones to, you know, take out Goliath's brothers. And that was in defense of his, you know, fellow Hebrews. You know, I mean, then you had Nehemiah, you know, building with one hand while being armed with the other, and so were the others that rebuilt the Jerusalem wall with him. You know, that was for self-defense with one hand and building with the other hand. You know, you have all sorts of examples. And you have Joshua, who led a war. He led an entire war. It was a defensive war against the Amalekites and the Canaanites and all the evil people that wanted to wipe out the Hebrews that lived in Israel, in ancient Israel. He led a defensive war against evil, and he defeated evil. You know, I mean, by the power of God, he led the Hebrews, Joshua, in self-defense, in a righteous war of self-defense, and he defeated the evil forces that wanted to annihilate the Hebrew people. So, you know, that's in the Old Testament too. You know, it's Old and New Testament. You know, when the disciples, who all carried swords, you know, when that guard got his ear cut when they came for Yeshua, the only reason Yeshua healed the ear is because he knew it was his time. That was why he was staying up in the garden praying and saying, you know, God, if it's possible, can you pass this on to someone else? Because he was living in a human body, so, you know, he didn't want to be, you know, necessarily go through all the pain that he was going to go through, but, you know, he did it anyway for us because he's our Messiah. You know, but you know, he still came in a human body. He still came in the flesh. So he had, you know, he didn't want to necessarily feel the pain, but when he stayed up praying and he, went with it. He decided to go with the guard, and he healed the guard's ear. But he didn't, he didn't have to do that. The disciples had swords for self-defense. If Yeshua was so against it, then he would have told them not to have the swords in the first place. But he never said that. He said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one, and 2 is enough. So there's another example of self-defense. Yeshua came as a sacrifice the first time, but the second time, when he returns, he's coming back to kick ass and take names, and I mean that literally, because he's going to take names in the Book of Life and his other books, and he's going to kick evil square in the ass. He's going to pick up the false prophet and the Antichrist, the beast, and he's going to throw him alive into the lake of fire, alive, and he's also going to open up his mouth. And it's going to destroy all the marked that took the mark, that aligned themselves with the beast, and the blood will run as high as to the horse's bridle. So he's not coming back like Barney the Purple Dinosaur to give hugs and pat people on the back and tell them it's all okay. No, he's coming back in camo to kick ass and take names. So Yeshua is a general, a mighty warrior king, and he's my general. And I don't like people slandering him by making him look like he's some, hippie weakling that lets people kick his ass all around. I hate that. I hate when people try to slander him, because that is slander. He is not a weakling. He's not Barney the dinosaur. He's not a hippie, that just, sings Kumbaya with everybody. No, he is a mighty warrior king, and I won't hear anything else of it. So we need to defend ourselves, because self-defense against evil is a righteous act. So, I understand there's going to be people that can't do it, because for whatever reason, because they're physically disabled, or they're women, or whatever, But, for an able-bodied man, we have no excuse. We have to defend the weak that are around us. We have to, or else Revelation 21:8 will apply to us, and I do not ever want that to apply to me. Revelation 21:8 is basically that cowards are not going to see heaven, but they'll be in the outer darkness. And I don't ever want to be considered a coward because I didn't protect the weak, or I didn't, do my manly duties as a good Christian man and stand up for people that needed to be stood up for or protected, and I didn't defend myself. If I just laid there like a doormat for Satan, that would make me a coward. So to hell with all that, literally. I'm not going to be one of those types of people, because I think the Jesuits have brainwashed a lot of Western Christianity into this, little meek, like cowardly type of mentality. And I'm totally against that. I'm very against that, because it's not correct. It's not even biblically correct. The Jesuits perverted the whole Bible, so I'll just put it that way. They've twisted and turned a lot of things. And that whole thing about, live by the sword, die by the sword, guess what? That doesn't apply to people defending themselves. You know who that applies to? That applies to murderers and thieves and people who literally live by their weapon and do evil deeds with their weapon. They eventually it'll catch up with them, and somebody who is defending themselves will slay that evil person who lived by their weapon and did evil with their weapon, because self-defense is a righteous act. So people get things twisted, Yeah, I get so tired of it, but enough about that. I'm going to go back to talking about my project. I get real serious when I talk about this. But the whole thing. Yeah, if you perish in self-defense, guess what? You've still been martyred. Even if you perish in self-defense, you're still martyred, because if you were killed by evil and you refused to let go of Yeshua, and you literally stood up and defended yourself, that's even better than just laying down and taking it. That's even better, because you literally like did something. You defended him, like literally. You didn't just like lay there and take it. No, you gotta protect yourself against evil. You gotta take a stand. You can't just lay there and be a doormat for Satan. No, never. But to die is to gain. So if they slay you and you're defending yourself, good. You know what? Then you're gonna go to heaven, and you won't be considered a coward either. So that's perfect. Yeah, Armored Saint, I hear you, bro. I'm just like you, man. I ain't worried about it. You know what? If any evil forces ever come at me, I already know that I ain't gonna lay down. I'm gonna take them on. In self-defense, but still, I'm not gonna lay down. I'm not gonna just like be like bending over for them. You know what I mean? So hell no. No, if I'm ever attacked by any evil forces, I don't care how they come or who they represent or claim to represent or who they're with. If they're evil and they're there to do evil, that's the metric I measure things by. I don't measure it by like, if they are Chinese or if they're who or bandits or no, if they're there to do evil, period. I don't care what kind of clothing they're wearing. I don't care what kind of neat little gadgets they have or who they claim to be representing. If they came there to do evil, I am going to stand against them, period. I don't care who they are. Evil is evil. That's the metric I measure things by. So if someone is there to do evil or harm against me or somebody else, I don't care what kind of, costume they're wearing or who they're with or if they're bandits or whatever. I don't care. Evil is evil. And if they're there to do evil, I'm there to stand against them, period. Because I'm as a believer in Yeshua, I'm a moralist, meaning that I'm going to do the morally right thing, no matter what the circumstances are. So I'm always going to make the right choice insofar as recognizing what evil is and standing against it, whatever it is and whoever it is. So I'm not an aggressor. I'm not an aggressor at all. I don't go after nobody. I don't bother anybody. I don't even threaten anybody. I'm just here minding my own business. Now, if I'm accosted or attacked by some sort of evil forces, then I'm defending myself, period. And I'm not even going to think twice about it, and I ain't going to look back at it. I'm just going to do what I got to do, and I'm gonna step on the head of the snake, and it'll be over. So that'll be that. But my project, back to that, it's going to go back with a lot of my older work, and I'm going to pick a character that's going to be in the location of the battle that happened at the national cap. That battle in my invasion scenario was an epic battle. I think I made like 6 or 7 videos on just that one specific battle, because it was like the highlight of the whole invasion, because it's the cap. They're taking the symbol of power. Like the Chinese are like literally like, it's like the Battle of Berlin when they were going to end Hitler's Germany, and they were going through Berlin street by street, building by building. It was like an epic battle. It was like the epic battle of World War II was the Battle of Berlin. It was like the final showdown between Nazism and the Soviet Union, and it was Hitler's last stand. Well, basically the DC battle, I made that like the last stand type of thing. Like I made it an epic battle. It was a huge battle, like the Chinese group army and the Pakistanis and the Russians and Belarusians that were all going in there. They were literally going street by street, house by house, building by building. It was an epic like Berlin type of battle. And I'm going to put a character that was in that battle, and then I'm going to make another character that was in another area, and another in another area. I'm going to make like 3 or 4 different characters that are each in a different area when I do this audiobook. It's going to be epic. Like this is going to be bigger than all my last stories. It's going to be like a combo of all the stories I've done, basically, but it's going to be a different line of story, as in different characters and everything, but it's going to be like combining aspects of the last 4 stories I wrote in the community tab that I wish people would read, but I guess people don't like to do all that scrolling. Hey, I don't blame them. I mean, maybe an audiobook's going to be a lot easier, but I'm going to make it like those, but it's going to be even longer because I'm going to have more characters. It's going to be epic. I mean, it's going to be very, very detailed. I'm even going to have an enemy character so people can see what's going on their side of things. It's going to be both sides. It's going to be like the Chinese and the Russians. It's going to be the Americans. I'm going to make this thing so multi-layered and so multifaceted. It's going to be a very, very long work. And the way I'm going to do it so I don't have to keep people waiting forever is as soon as I finish one part or one chapter, or actually not one, but it's going to be many. As soon as I finish maybe 5 parts, I'll do one live that'll be a part, like a reading of 5 different chapters or parts. And then I'll do another that's another 5. I'll break it up into longer segments. So each live will be maybe a few hours or so. That way it's like something, when I make a playlist for it, people can just listen to it the whole way through, because as you finish one, it'll jump to the next and then to the next, sort of like how I did my internal civil conflict one in a playlist. There's 5 videos in there, and if you listen to it the whole way through, it's so long, it would take up the greater part of a day. It's about 12 hours, but hey, it turned out pretty good. I mean, I think so. I was listening to it again, some of the parts, and I was like, man, aside from maybe like mincing a few words, they're like, or like in my head, I might have like accidentally mixed up a few words I didn't mean to mix up, but aside from like tiny little minced words here and there, it turned out amazing to me. I mean, I listened to it, I'm like, wow, I actually did a pretty decent job on this one, you know. I think it's a lot. I think that's even, in some ways, it's even a little better than my invasion one. Not in terms of like the content itself, but just how it was presented. I mean, I think it ended up being a decent thing. Um, I'm just glad I finally got it done. Yeah, but man, I'm so glad y'all are here, man. I'm glad to see all y'all, man. Y'all are great. Really, y'all are great. And I thank y'all for sticking it, with me on this whole thing. Like you guys are. Oh, thanks, Armored Saint. Man, you're cool, man. You've always been cool. You too, Ken, and everybody. Y'all been great, man. All y'all. I'm glad y'all are here. And I'm excited to do this audio book. I want this to be a really good presentation. And the I'll try to have a background for it so it's not all bland, like the first part of my internal conflict one was where I'm reading the story. I'm going to try and do a background for it, just so you have something to look at while I'm reading it. If you just like to look at screens, but but yeah, I'm going to try and make this pretty epic. But I'm glad to see all y'all, man. Before I go, because my phone's about to die, I got to plug it in soon. I just wanted to see if anybody had anything else to say. If y'all want to say something to me, speak now or hold your peace till the next time. Thanks, Eric, man. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Thank you. Yeah, Guns, you want me to make sound effects? Yeah. I mean, maybe I could, but I mean, it'd be I'd feel sort of cheesy for it, but I mean, I had the sound effects sort of when I wrote the stories when I did the typed versions, but you would have to like imagine it in your head. But I mean, if I was like verbally making it, it would sound kind of funny probably. But maybe I will. I might do like a testing sort of thing where I test a sound and see what it sounds like when I play it back. See if it sounds legit. See if it's legit. Yeah, yeah, Pop Smoke. I don't know, man. It might be something. Hey, Heather. Yeah, good to see you too. And Ken, also, thank you, Ken. Weathered. Good job, Chad. This was enjoyable. Oh, yeah, I enjoyed it too, man. I enjoyed interacting with everybody. I thought this was pretty good for an informal one. I mean, I'm just kind of loose, chilling, stayed up all night, so I'm just, I don't know when I'm gonna go to sleep next. Sometimes I sleep during the day, sometimes I sleep at, a little bit at night, or sometimes all night. It just depends. I don't have like a really good, sleep-wake cycle. I just sort of go to sleep when I feel tired, and I wake up and stay up until I feel like I'm tired again. So, I've been up a while, but I just felt like getting on here and, BSing and talking to people and talking about my next project and all that. Yeah, I'm glad to see everybody. I'm glad for all y'all that watch my internal conflict series, the whole playlist, all 5 of them. I'm glad. I tried to make the 5th one pretty cool. I put that little special operations mission in it, because things like that happen in wars. Leaders get captured, and then you got to send in a special operations team to get them out. I mean, or they do like different raids, like where they'll raid like a headquarters, or they'll like laze it for like aircraft to come in and drop a laser guided munition on it, or whatever. I put a little spec ops mission in there where they had to go, where the Free American Army faction had to go get their supreme Western forces. Because the supreme commander of the Free American Army faction was the junta leader, the Lieutenant General Mathis, but another lieutenant general who was their Western commander of the Western forces that were by the Hoover Dam. He's the one that got them a victory at the Hoover Dam battle. Well, he got captured by the Mormon extremist group that were like terrorist allies of the Mormon state they came in because they wanted like sort of like how groups in Syria came in to get battle experience in Syria. So when they went back to Europe, they would be like hardened terrorists. The same thing happened in my scenario. You had the Mormon Way, which was a European-based Mormon extremist group that went to the American internal conflict, and they were protected by the Mormon state, who protected them so that they could have a training camp, and then they could fight alongside of them or carry out, terrorist-style attacks, like when they drove the nuke into San Diego, and they acted as a proxy for the Mormon state and nuked San Diego of the regime faction. Well, the things like that happen in war, where you get like a general captured or some sort of important leader, and you got to go in and get them out. So you send in your spec ops, or you might have a raid on something, like I was just saying. So I thought I'd throw a little cool little, the curveball in like that little spec ops mission. That was pretty cool. And then I put in the the last couple battles, I talked more about how the logistics began to be drained and the forces fought each other to exhaustion, and then the Chinese and Russians came in. That was like where the series ended. I just mentioned that the invasion of the U.S. began. But my invasion scenario is separate as far as like a timeline goes. It's a different timeline where America didn't have a civil conflict. But the one I'm doing my audiobook on is a continuation of my past work. So remember, it's not after an internal conflict. It's just when America has economic problems without an internal conflict. So that'll be the basis of my audiobook. It'll be like a continuation of my past invasion work, just different characters and maybe a few new places. But yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you. Any quick questions? Doopsy. Chad, what do you think will happen to the children and the invasion happens? Well, I mean, if you want my honest truth, it's not going to be good for nobody. It doesn't matter if you're like a grandparent or a child. It's all going to be the same. War is war. Like if you look at any nation that's embroiled in a conflict, the young and the innocent suffer the most, because they have to endure all the conditions of a country that is totally destroyed, and the services are gone, the poor medical care, the lack of food, and the constant threat of being annihilated and being caught between some sort of combat, or they're taken as slaves, by the Chinese, or they're genocided by the Chinese, because Chinese want to genocide a lot of Americans and enslave the rest. So you got to understand that affects everybody. It affects everybody. That's why a lot of people are going to have to learn how to live in the woods and learn how to be nomadic. I've told people you're going to end up in the woods. Nobody is going to be where they begin when the invasion happens. And what I mean by that is you're not going to be in your home during the invasion. I mean, maybe for like a few days or whatever, but you're not going to end up there. Like, you're not going to stay in your house the whole time the invasion's going on. You're going to actually have to get up. You're going to have to physically relocate. Nobody is going to be where they started when the invasion happens. Everybody is going to be forced out of their home, either as defenseless refugees because they didn't arm or train themselves, or they're going to be forced out into the woods as partisans who defend themselves, and they survive as a mutual defense tribal type of organization. That's what it'll be like. So you're either going to be a refugee living under the protection of some sort of a partisan tribe, or you're going to be a partisan and you're going to defend yourself, or you're not, or you're just going to be a helpless refugee. And if you're a helpless refugee, then you're just dead weight pretty much, unless you have something to contribute, like you can grow food, or you can provide some sort of a service like medical care or whatever, to the group. So yeah, that's basically it. But yeah, I'm at 5%. I got to get going, y'all. Yeah, I love y'all. Thank you all for coming. Seriously, I appreciate every one of you. Y'all be blessed.